Welcome. My name is Michelle Miller. I'm the Performing Arts Network Chair for Arts Alumni. I'm also a TV film actress based in New York. This is, like I said, the third installment, which is a series of panels, discussions we have with alumni in various and specific fields in entertainment. So if you have any sort of desire to have a panel or have a particular topic you want us to go over this year, let us know, because like I said, we're doing this every month, so we want to hear from you guys. This series is produced specifically with Arnon Shorr, who's going to be moderating today. He's a filmmaker, a screenwriter, a graphic novelist, a fellow Brandeisian. You'll meet him in a minute. I also like to say I host a podcast called Mentors on the Mic, where I interview amazing mentors in entertainment about how they started and how they moved up. And two of our panelists are actually previous mentors on the podcast. So if you ever have any interest, I'll probably at some point put links in, but David Grae and Matt Witten have been mentors on the podcast. So today's event and this series is being put together by the Brandeis Arts Network, which is a group exclusive to Brandeis undergraduates and graduate alumni that enable everyone involved in the arts, both professionals and enthusiasts alike, to engage, share, and experience the vast array of artistic endeavors of fellow Brandeisians on campus, across the country, and abroad. The Brandeis Arts Network also encompasses and supports the efforts of the Performing Arts Network and the Brandeis Alumni in Film and Television. You can find these links, the Brandeis Arts Network, the Performing Arts Network, and Brandeis Alumni in Film and Television on Facebook. You do not have to memorize everything I just said. Hopefully it's coming up in the chat right now. You can have the links to the Facebook group so you can get updates for further things in the future and network with other alum. Great. And then our next panel, just to let you guys know, is April 27th, which is going to be an Oscars post-mortem with Scott Feinberg of The Hollywood Reporter and Brandeis's very own film history guru, Professor Thomas Doherty. So do not miss that, April 27th, same time, same place. Great. So I wanted to go over a couple quick polling questions. We like to have an idea of who's out there right now. So our first polling question is going to be, who are you? Are you a Brandeis current student? Are you a graduate? Are you faculty and staff? Are you family and friends? We just kind of want to have an idea of who's coming to this, who are we talking to right now? And then our next poll, which we wanted to do at the same time, is why are you here? Are you interested in writing? Are you interested in just entertainment in general? Like me, I'm not a writer as much as I am in entertainment, or you're just not interested. Okay, great. So mostly Brandeis graduates. And just barely, I'm interested in writing for the screen. That's excellent. That's good for us to know. Thank you guys for doing that. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass this along to Arnon Shorr. Arnon, take it away.
Thank you, Michelle. Hi, everybody. So before we begin, as we talk, if you have questions for the panelists, drop them in the chat. Michelle is sticking around. She's monitoring the chat. She is going to be curating those questions for a Q&A at the end of the panel. So as questions come up, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll try to get to them. So it's really an honor for me to moderate this panel with Mark Altman, David Grae, Marta Kauffman, and Matt Witten, all Brandeis alumni, all exceptional writers in television. They also do other things, which we'll get to a little bit. So let's see, Matt, Mark, Marta, and David. David, you're the only non-M name. I'm sorry about that. We couldn't, get that kind of worked out. But why don't you all start with like a 1-minute intro? Tell us a little bit about yourselves, what you do. Go ahead. Whoever wants to dive in first.
Oh my God, I can't believe all these Jews are so shy. I'll
Give it a minute.
It's deference, Marta.
I'll jump in. So I guess I'll work backwards. I am currently, we are about to finish our 7th season of Grace and Frankie, which I co-created and am showrunner for and have directed a bunch of. Previous to that, I've done several documentaries, Seeing Allred, about Gloria Allred, and Blessed is the Match, which was about Hannah Senesh, and a little film called Havana Gila the Movie, which was about basically tracing it from when it was a Nigun to when it became something that people would ice skate to. And before that, I did Friends. I co-created and showran Friends. I have 3 amazing children and was a theater major at Brandeis. And I always say that Brandeis is where I learned to be a human being. So that's my spiel.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. David, you want to go next?
Sure, sure. So I'll go the other direction just to shake things up than Marta did. I think the most important thing I did vis-a-vis this panel was I was the co-founder at Brandeis of False Advertising, the first improv group at Brandeis. And I learned about 5 years ago that it still existed, and it still, in fact, it still exists to this day. And they actually have statues of the founders. It's like a Mount Rushmore of improv at Brandeis, so it's fantastic. But I did do that, and that was great. And it's funny, I was almost a theater major at Brandeis. I was an English major, and I came one class shy of being an English major. Marta, I don't know if he was still teaching, if he was there when you were, but I bet he was. Jim Clay.
Oh my God, Jim Clay.
He taught, he's a great guy, and he taught arts and crafts of theater, and I didn't want to take that class. But I had to take it to get the double major. So I was not a theater major. But I do, so when I look back at my time at Brandeis, all I did was theater, directing, acting, and I wasn't quite writing yet at Brandeis, but it really got me. It was the beginning of my career as a writer, even though I only took one playwriting class, like my sophomore or senior year. I can't quite remember, but doing theater there and acting and directing and producing theater was a great education.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to say that Jim Clay is who taught me about the architecture of a scene. Wow.
I should have taken the class.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd be as successful as you. but that's great to hear. He was a great guy. And then randomly, because I didn't want to wait tables, when I got out of school, I started a school for creative writing in New York called Gotham Writers Workshop. That's still going strong today. I did some theater. I wrote a play called Moose Mating that's been published by Drowners Play Service and has had some productions regionally and some around the world. And in terms of my TV writing career, I got started pretty late. I've only been doing it for about 17 years. And I've written on Joan of Arcadia and Gilmore Girls and Without a Trace. I was on Castle for several years, for 6 seasons, and then most recently on Madam Secretary as an EP and sort of co-showrunner, even though I was the number 2 to Barbara Hall, the genius Barbara Hall, who created that show. And I'm currently developing, working on a pilot for Netflix. So that's my spiel.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Matt, how about you?
Sure. Yeah, I got an MFA in playwriting from Brandeis, where I actually ran the projector for a show of Marta's called Personals. And so I came out of Brandeis and I started writing plays, and I wrote several plays that were done in New York and around the world. The Deal, Sacred Journey, Washington Square Moves, Ties That Bind. And then at a certain point, I kind of realized that my favorite thing to do in the world was to put my feet up and read a mystery. So I decided to start writing mystery novels. And so I wrote 4 mystery novels that were published by Signet. They were humorous amateur sleuth novels. And somewhere in there, by some odd quirk, I got the call to come out to LA and start writing for TV. So I wrote for Homicide, and then Law and Order, and House, and Pretty Little Liars, and several other dramas, mostly crime dramas. And then somewhere in there, I wrote the movie Drones. And then a couple of years ago, I had another of those realizations where I realized that my favorite thing to do at this point in my life was to sit and, put my feet up, have a cup of tea, and read thrillers, thriller novels. So I started writing thriller novels. And my first one is going to be published this September. And this is my, what do you call it, my visual aid. It's called Necklace. I'm very excited about it. It's coming out this September. So that's my story.
Thank you, Matt. Mark, last but
I'm
not
the-
least.
The president of the Thomas Doherty fan club, but when I'm not doing that, I've been a showrunner for TV on currently on the CW show Pandora. I got my start. Unlike these fine people, I had nothing to do with the theater department. I was the editor of the Justice, and that was an amazing opportunity. I'll tell you how not to break into the entertainment business. I interviewed Gary David Goldberg, who some of you younger people may not know who he is. He was one of the legends of television comedy. He did Family Ties. He did a short-lived show called The Bronx Zoo that I loved. He did Spin City. He's on the Mount Rushmore of TV comedy showrunners. And I interviewed him. Great interview, fantastic. He was a Brandeis alumnus. He was one of those people like Abby Hoffman used to always talk about, you know, when you talk about the great Brandeis alums, you know, you said, oh, Gary David Goldberg. So I remember getting a letter back from him that said on Ubu Stationery, that was the dog at the end of his shows. And it said, I love the interview. I paper the house with them. Call me when you graduate if you need a job. So I thought, oh my God, this is great. I got a job when I graduate. I'm set. This is fantastic. Remember, I was young and naive at the time. And so, you know, when I graduated, you know, I called up Gary David Goldberg's office. I'm like, hey, I you know, I want to come work for you. And he said, oh, well, come out to visit, you know, and so I, you know, planned this whole trip to go out to California, and I was going to sit down with Gary, and, you know, I had my whole life planned out, you know, here. And I, for whatever reason, I just could not get this in on the schedule. And I heard from his assistant. I was like, you know, what's going on? You know, Gary, you know, he's promised me this job. And I'm just wondering what's going on. And she says, yeah, you know, he means it when he says it, but he says that to a lot of people. And I'm like, oh man. Now the irony of this is I ended up selling his company a feature many years later. So I felt like I got something for my effort. But that was my first experience with the reality, you know, of TV. But of course, I have nothing but incredible affinity for Brandeis. One of my absolute favorite experiences of all time was junior year. I went to the dinner for all the commencement speakers, and it was like a slugger's row. It was Spielberg, and he was there with Lou Wasserman and Amy Irving and Sid Sheinberg, who I ended up writing a script for, which was the worst pitch the stupidest idea ever. I just wanted to hear Sid Sheinberg's stories, so I ended up taking the gig. Bart Giamatti was there. Benny Goodman. I mean, it was like, it was incredible. It was this incredible night. I will never forget it. And I think I was the one person who was more excited to meet Lou Wasserman than to meet Spielberg, as excited as that was. But I have to say, you know, that, you know, my entertainment journalism experience at Brandeis paved the way for me to be an entertainment journalist for many years, at which point I sold my first movie, which was a project I made, well, now it's about 20 years ago, called Free Enterprise, with Eric McCormick and Bill Shatner, who was not 90 years old at the time. He was much younger. And it was a comedy about two Star Trek fans who meet their idol, William Shatner, and find out he's more fucked up than they are. And it was a really fun romantic comedy. And it played theatrically for a while and got great reviews. And that sort of led into producing a bunch of independent films and then working in TV, everything from Necessary Roughness. David and I worked briefly on Castle, ton of other shows. And it's just been an incredible road. And then I also write nonfiction books, oral histories of significant shows. So I've done oral histories for St. Martin's of the James Bond films, Nobody Does It Better. The book on oral history of Star Wars is coming out later this year. And I've done a series of these and it's always a great opportunity, because it's a chance to pick other people's brains and to learn from them, because you never stop learning. No matter how successful you get at your own chosen field, there's always so much to learn from other people. That's why something like this is great. It's like, as much as we're here to talk, we're here to listen to what everybody else has to say. It's always great doing these panels, particularly when it's for your alma mater. Because I was saying to them before that I've done Williams, I've done NYU, I've done a bunch of other people's schools, but Brandeis never asked. So I'm very happy to be doing a Brandeis event.
Well, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. Thank you, everybody. So some of you kind of started to answer the next question that I have. It's a fairly common question in these kinds of panels, but I'd like to give it a little bit of a twist to make it a little fresh. I'd like you to tell us a little bit, if you haven't already, how you got your start in TV. And the twist is, do you think that the way that you got in, the way you kicked down the door, is still possible for somebody starting out now?
I mean, I don't really know if the way that I got in is still possible. The way that I got in is from people seeing my one of my stage plays, or two of my stage plays. And that's how I got a manager and an agent. And it's how I got my first job at Homicide and my second job at Law and Order. And so for me, I didn't write, a spec script or anything like that. But that's not a route that I would advise to people that want to become TV writers. I mean, people that want TV writers, I very much recommend that they write a spec pilot and then write another spec pilot, because the first one might not be so good. The second one will be better. I'd also recommend to people that they, if possible, get a job as a production assistant or a writing assistant so that they can meet people. And I'd also recommend that when they have a spec script they're happy with, a spec pilot, to enter reputable contests with it. And also just do everything they can to knock down the door of an agent or a manager. That's the main thing that I would recommend to people. I know sometimes also people sometimes will shoot a short film that they've done, or shoot a portion of a pilot that they've written. And that's also, I think, a good calling card. So those are the things that I would recommend. I got into it just from being a playwright, but I think that's kind of a long way around and not something that is that easy to duplicate.
Yeah, I gotta actually disagree with Matt for a second, because a lot of development execs right now and studios are looking for playwrights. You hear it a lot. So, not that you necessarily would go into playwriting as an entree to TV. You should go into playwright because you're passionate about it. You have stories to tell, and that's what you love, which is, true of anything, but particularly in the arts. But quite the contrary, I find that to be, a very valid entry. I know a good friend of mine who's a showrunner on something you just said, like, she wanted to hire some people she'd worked with before, and they say, we really want you to hire playwrights. I mean, literally, this is what they were saying. And it's something you hear, a lot more of. The business has changed dramatically, and I'm sure everyone else is going to talk about this, in the last couple of years, dramatically. And so I don't think any one person's break-in story is necessarily the way. There's no guide. There's so many different ways. And it has been a relationship business for such a long time, but with aggregation, with metrics, and particularly with the streamers, it's interesting how sort of the traditional relationships are sort of getting turned on their head, and so many other factors are entering the picture. But at the end of the day, it's still about, can you write? Can you deliver the goods? Do people want to work with you?
Yeah, I would also, go ahead, Marta. Go ahead, Marta.
I was just going to say, I think two things can be true. I think on the one hand, yes, what you are suggesting about what Matt is suggesting about there are ways in where you start as a PA and you work your way up. I know that we have promoted a number of people who started as interns. On the other hand, there's another way in. If you have a unique enough voice, I think you can make your way in with that. You may not be able to run your own show, but I think there are ways. We were musical theater people, wrote a musical, and This was with David Crane, who also went to Brandeis. And an agent came one night and said, "Why aren't you guys writing television?" And we said, "I don't know." She is our agent to this day. That was in
Wow.
1985. So when we came out here and we met with all the agents and about what are you going to do and how are you going to get there, and they all said, "You got to get a job on somebody else's show." I had a baby. I was like, you know what? I don't want to do it that way. And David and I decided we were going to find a way to do where we created our own stuff. And thanks to her, who said, "All right, let's give this a shot," we were able to have an entree into our careers that weren't simply work your way up through the ranks. And therefore, I think both things can be true, and to this day are true. I read young writers all the time, and playwrights, and I mean, all kinds of writers. You know, the trick is, do these people know characters? Do they know conflict? Do they know how to have a beginning, a middle, and an end to a story? It doesn't matter if it's a play or if it's a movie or if it's a book or if it's an article. All of those things apply when you're looking for writers. That's it.
Yeah, and I have kind of the theory of everything that I think is going to pull it all together, which is I wanted to be a television writer, and I had written specs. And back like 20 years ago, when I was trying to break in, it was spec scripts. It wasn't pilots. And I wrote my two specs of my two favorite shows, West Wing and The Sopranos. And a little twist was it was only like season 3 or 4 of The Sopranos, but I wrote the series finale and did a catch up at the beginning of Previously On to get you where I needed to be for the series finale. But when I moved to LA 20 years ago, as sort of throwing a cocktail party to meet people, the relationship part, I produced and directed my own play. And one day, the lead actor, the guy who's playing the main part in the play, said to me, "You know, my wife is," he said like a weird thing, like, "My wife is sniffing around you or something." I was like, but he meant she was helping him with his lines. And it turned out, this was Jerry Levine, and his wife is Nina Tassler, was and is, who went on to become the president, the chairman of CBS, but at the time was the most powerful hour drama executive in the business, and who I know to this day. And she's fantastic. And she said to me, you know, sort of what Marta, like what someone said, "Why don't you have an agent?" Like, what? Because I didn't have an agent at the time. And it's exactly why I put on the play. And she hooked me up with a big time agent and a manager. And then you could trace the path to my first job. And I said to my agent, I said, when it was frustrating, because it took a few years for me to get my first job, I said to my agent, "Should I try to get a writer's assistant job or something like that?" And he said, "No, you're a writer. We're going to sell you as a writer. Those jobs go to people's cousins and friends, and it would be harder to get you that job than to get your first staff job." And when I got hired on Joan of Arcadia by Barbara Hall for my first job, she was looking for a playwright, because she had a lot of success with this terrific writer who I worked with recently also on Madam Secretary, Joy Gregory. And she said to the executive at CBS, "Give me someone who's a playwright, who writes with a rhythm and is funny." And he thought of me. And I think literally I was the only, she just wanted someone pre-approved by the network. And so, you know, it's, but I had my specs ready, but she just wanted to read my play, it turns out. So there's a lot of ways to skin a cat.
It sounds like a lot of those ways are still potentially possible. I mean, if people are still looking for playwrights, if theater is still one of the possible mines for new talent, which leads me to the next question that I have for all of you who've been part of this system and part of this industry in one form or another for, I think, I think, David, you said you're probably newest to the industry of the four of you, and you've been in it for almost 2 decades. It has changed a lot. I think that's an understatement. And I'm wondering, as creative people who are trying to tell stories within a system, how have the changes in television? I mean, David, when you started, you wrote a spec for Sopranos, which was at the time revolutionary as far as what was going on cable. And since then, Marta with Grace and Frankie as a Netflix show, the whole model has changed and changed again and changed again. How have those changes changed what or how you write, if they have?
Marta, you want to?
Because it keeps changing, it's hard to really answer that question. I mean, when we first were doing Grace and Frankie at Netflix, there was this thing about you go from here's the first script you're going to write to 13 episodes, which was insane. I mean, you didn't get to do a pilot, you didn't get to make mistakes, you had to learn along the way, and it turned out to be thrilling and fantastic and a new creative endeavor that was exciting and challenging. But things are changing again. And now it's not so much going from the pilot to 13 episodes as it is going from here's the pilot, let's now see proof of series. And it's in a weird way, as much as there are a million places that you can do a TV show, they're making you jump through more hoops than they did 6 years ago.
How does that compare to something like Friends, where it's broadcast and kind of a whole different animal?
That's a whole different thing. I mean, with Friends, you knew going into it, here's the process. You're going to write a pilot, they'll pick it up or they won't. They pick it up, you cast the pilot, you shoot the pilot, they either pick it up or they won't. And then you do some episodes and they either do more episodes or they don't. But there was a very clear path along the way. Right now, I'm confused. I mean, look, we're very, very fortunate to have a 7th season on Grace and Frankie, which will be Netflix's longest running show. I'm going to pat myself on the back for that for a minute. And now they're only doing 3 seasons of things. So you have to change your approach to the story so that you can tell your full story in 3 years, in 3 seasons, and that may only be 10 episodes a season, which, by the way, sucks for the writers.
Yeah, I tell you, I'm experiencing change. I went from just doing network shows, which I think is, I think there's a lot of there's a bit of snobbery about, cable and streaming versus network. Try writing 22 to 24 or more, maybe Friends, you guys, half hours, you guys are doing 30 or 28, that's the badass thing to do, is every 8 days having no script and just do it for 10 months or 11 months or practically all year round. But now I'm working on I sold a project to Netflix, and each season they told me it's 8 episodes, Marta, per season. And basically the deal is kind of for 3 seasons, but but before they decide to shoot anything, I have to not only write the pilot, but I have to basically write an outline of the entire first season. You have to break every episode. They call it story documents, a page per episode, but it ends up being 2 or 3 pages, because if you're going to do a page, it's easier to do 2 or 3. You have to work out the whole thing and the arc of all the characters in the whole thing. I did more work.
Bullshit. It's
Yes.
bullshit because the minute you start doing it, it changes.
Yeah, exactly. And so I've done, but it's got to be good because I want to get this on the air. I've never gotten my own original show on the air. So I'm taking the shot, but and again, we're so fortunate to do what we do. And I've been incredibly fortunate. If I never worked another day, the business doesn't owe me anything, but I've never worked so hard, on something because they're paying me like I'm getting paid for a pilot, but really it's so much more. And so that is the business changing. But on the upside, I'll say that it was interesting working out the whole season. And I do look forward to being able to do it because when you work out the whole thing, it does inform earlier episodes. So yeah, it's changing. I like the network model too, which still does exist. And I certainly might be going back to as I have to pay for, my kids in college and everything.
Yeah, I mean, there's a seismic shift going on in the business. It was 26, then it became 13. 10 was the new 13. Now 8's the new 10. And, it doesn't mean that people are being paid. People see all this money and they think, oh my God, there's all that money. But then you're working for 2 years, doing what David's talking about, developing all this stuff. And then they want more and more and more because a lot of people are saying, oh, we're finally getting rid of the pilots. Isn't that great? But then they want so much in lieu of a pilot to go straight to series. And I mean, the show that I'm doing now is a different model. It's an acquired acquisition, which is, basically we sold it straight to series, but then, the network pays X for a license fee. And then we had to bring in, our deficit financing and, a bunch of international sales. And so, there's so many different models. That doesn't even get into the fact that everything has to be an IP because, as these companies start to build, Paramount Plus and HBO Max and Disney Plus, that the thing that's going to attract people and get them to spend on streaming, is the IP. So you start to see, Star Wars and Marvel, and now, Disneyland itself is becoming its own universe, shared universe. Ron Moore is developing it, so it'll probably be good. But, and then the stuff that HBO Max is developing, but there's less and less of an appetite for original content. That's just the same as it is in features.
I guess what I really appreciate about, TV now, as a writer is just that, shows are better, than they used to be. TV shows are better than they were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So, I'm pitching a show now that I wouldn't have been able to pitch, 5 or 10, 15, 20 years ago. And, whatever, it's better. I'm into crime shows, and it used to be, the homicide of the week. That was okay, it's good, but it's more fun when you have a really cool, murder that goes on for the whole season or for 3 seasons. I'd rather watch, Broadchurch than Law and Order. I mean, so I just really appreciate the opportunities that we all have now to, write really cool stuff that we didn't have, years ago.
What do you think it is about the changes in the industry that have allowed for this evolution in the content itself?
I think Netflix. I just think that there's, it used to be that, reruns would just be, one-offs on cable networks. But now, people binge watch, they watch the whole thing on Netflix. So I think that leads to much more serialized dramas than there used to be. And I think in general, for me, more fun dramas, more complex, more interesting dramas.
And that's the whole reason that business has evolved from procedural to serialized, because it used to be, you assume, and it's true, even people could program the VCRs, then they got TiVo, then they got streaming. And so all of a sudden you wouldn't have to miss an episode. You couldn't do serialized because people, maybe I'm going out to dinner that night and I missed the episode and there's no way to see it. But now that every episode is available on demand, serialized over the last couple of years has become what it's at, except in sort of internationally where there's still like a real appetite. But then, we were talking before we went on the air or whatever this is, about unorthodox, but at the same time, what's the most popular show on television still? NCIS. So like, our taste and our interest in subject. Like I love Call My Agent, which I think is phenomenal. It's very different, potential from what the quote unquote, masses are consuming. And yet it'd be very hard to get an NCIS on the air now because it's not sexy.
On the other hand, we just did a script, a pilot script for ABC, and the response was, we're only doing procedurals. Because on streaming, binging works, but on networks, it doesn't.
Yeah.
People are too frustrated, probably having to wait a week when they could just go on a streamer and watch whatever they want. Yeah. To me, it's like it's additive what's happened. The network model is still there and the procedurals. And all these other models and deficit financing, Mark, and Netflix, it's all out there. I mean, look, I'm a grown up. I chose to do this project on Netflix that's kicking my ass and putting me through hoops. I could have just stuck with network. In fact, I poo-pooed network jobs that I had an opportunity to be a part of, streaming shows where obviously that's where the money is. But coming off of my last job, I just didn't feel like doing that. But it's a choice. I think you could get into, any side of the business. People that are in could get in any side they want. But if you're breaking in, and I don't know how much of this conversation is about that, you could also choose where you want to go. I think there's more of a chance. What Marta did is incredible, saying, I think, 30 years ago, whenever it was, I think I'm just gonna create my own stuff. I mean, that's 1 in a million. Very few people were able to achieve that. And I love Dream On, and obviously Friends, but it's but now I think the pendulum has swung around where there's more of an opportunity with the network model. That's harder to do. But as I think Matt or Mark were saying, on Netflix and on other streamers and cable, they need more content. They need more shows and original ideas.
But the funny thing that you talked about, David, is now somebody could break in, with a fresh original voice. They won't even get EP. They won't even get showrunner. Maybe they get co-EP if they're lucky. Which is crazy. That somebody creates this, they come up with something amazing, and then the first thing, it's one thing to have a co-showrunner show them the ropes because they don't know, this business. But they're sort of given like such short. They're not the red carpet is not rolled out for them. It's a widget. It's not valued.
After we did Dream On, where we were very fortunate that they let us run the show. We were at the same time developing for Norman Lear, and he did not let us run the show.
Right.
So yeah, it's hard. It is hard to get people to encourage show running as you're breaking in.
Just to reiterate something that Mark said, it's really been a big change that if you want to create a show now, it helps so much if you have intellectual property. If it's based on a novel, a stage play, a TV show that was successful in Israel, whatever it might be, it's really way more important than it used to be. And the other thing we haven't talked about so much is I definitely get the impression that the industry is much more receptive to minorities and women as writers than it used to be. So I think that's been, a real big change that I've seen since I started.
On the topic of IP and having other content and writing other content, many of you started in theater and wrote plays. Mark, you've written books. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the differences in, what it means to write a play versus a TV show, or even going between movies and TV, and the thought process that kind of goes into that. Let's see, Mark, maybe if you could start,
Well,
you seem to
I'll just say when I broke in doing indie features, that before I did television. And, it was the era of, there was the post Sex, Lies, and Videotape, where you would make something for no money, like Swingers, and go to Sundance and sell it for a bunch of money. This was not a good model for people to count on, myself included. So, and we made some dumb choices. I mean, like on our first film, New Line wanted to buy it, and we were like, oh, they're not offering enough money, so we'd rather wait until Miramax sees it, and it's just like stupid thing. Look, youth is wasted on the young. But I loved working in features, but it kept, taking longer and longer to develop things, and a lot of things did not turn out the way I hope, because you have to give up too much control, and as a result, it's like I just gave up a couple of years of my life to get this, and it wasn't stuff that it became less and less stuff I was passionate about. So making the move to television was a really great decision, because it was as the industry was changing, because features were becoming less sexy, TV was becoming more, and over the last 10 years, TV, there's so many more opportunities than there are in features, and a lot more interesting work is being done in television than is being done in features for the most part. So I was really glad to make that transition, and it was sort of because and I sort of did it by hitching my cart to a friend who was already working in TV. We decided to work together, and that was great, having a writing partner. Initially he sort of took the lead, and over time I kind of took the lead on the whole thing. But it was great, because if you only so you have somebody to bitch to, as well, who understands what you're going through. So it was a really great process to have, someone that you could be simpatico with and work with. And he wasn't my best friend. He's still not my best friend. I mean, the first thing we did together was Castle. David will remember. And I remember walking in the first day, and we had these two desks facing each other, and we'd never worked in a room together, because everything we'd done had been like separate. And I was like, I don't know if we're going to kill each other, if this is even going to work. And fortunately it did. But it was pretty scary for a while. It's like, would we even be able to get along? We didn't like having desks facing each other. It was like, oh God, we got to look at each other all day.
Well, I could answer the question definitively, Arnon, which is, if you could write a good play, if you're a good playwright, you could absolutely write for television. It might not go the other way. The absolute hardest thing to do is a play, because you can't say, not only can you not say what the character's thinking, which you typically can't do on television, you also can't zoom in and show something. It all has to come out. Pretty much all of it needs to be in the dialogue, maybe some with some actions, but that people could see from way far back. So that's by far the hardest, in my opinion. And you have to have an ear for dialogue to write television. I think particularly sitcoms. I don't think there's anywhere to hide in a sitcom in terms of being a good writer. You could hide in a procedural, because it's a little like being a mechanic sometimes, and it's about putting together, unfurling these mysteries over a canvas of 4 or 5 or 6 acts of network television. And they actually, like a lot of sitcoms, you don't want the writing to be, you don't want a lot of flair. You just want the mystery to be the star. But the movement in dramas is more toward more character, more humor. And like I said, in sitcoms, there's nowhere to hide. I mean, I had a funny experience going from the show Without a Trace to Gilmore Girls, which really was an hour comedy. And I remember the Without a Trace writers being a little snobby, like think, oh, we're such a hard-edged show, and we were the #2 show in the country. Well, I didn't consider it writing. I mean, it really was like being a mechanic. And no one, on that staff, I don't think anyone else on that staff could have written Gilmore Girls, where you actually had to write, with rhythm and flair and humor. But there's this weird thing in the procedural world about hard edge, which, we're going to write about a backroom poker room where they're, abusing women, and that's a hard edge. I don't know, as opposed to just good writing.
I think either way, television writing is meant to be heard. And people watch TV while they're cooking dinner, while they're folding their laundry. it's very intimate in a weird way. And I think the writing is crucial in either way, in either the procedural, the drama, or the comedy, because you may not be able to look up from what you're doing with your laundry to get the full picture. So, you know, I think in each of these cases, the words are crucial. And I would also say for anyone who's writing, you've got to have a way to hear the words out loud, because you write them and they sound like one thing in your brain, and then you hear them out loud, and actors breathe life into it. And even writers who read each other's stuff breathe life into it. And it's a whole new way of embracing what you've written and dealing with what you've written.
Right.
Don't
You know,
use Final Draft's audio module where it goes, this is a very interesting panel. That never works. It's the worst.
but you know, building on what Marta said, it's worth remembering that television evolved from radio, which is exactly what Martha was talking about. Literally, the CBS radio, I think, became CBS Broadcasting, but ended up doing television. And film, movies, it started out as silent movies where there were no words. And that's why they're a director's medium. Television is a writer's medium. And so it's all about the words. Absolutely.
You know, for me, what's been the biggest difference between TV writing and other kinds of writing is really the passion that I have when I'm writing it. Speaking as, you know, I've never created a show, but I've written for about 8 or 9 different TV shows. And like when you're writing for a show that you're not exactly passionate about, you know, you do your best and you try to put your whole soul into it, and you try to believe in it, and you try to make this episode of Jag be like better than Shakespeare. But like, you know, when I'm writing for a television show, I don't generally like go to sleep dreaming about the characters or thinking about them. Like when I wrote for House, I love Hugh Laurie, love the character, but it's not like I was obsessed by him exactly. And so it was something like David describes. It's like a technical exercise to some extent. You know, you really want to put everything together, you know, in a certain kind of way. When I write a novel, it's like I go to bed thinking about the characters. When I wake up in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning, you know, first thing in the morning, I'm thinking about the characters. And I think my writing's better. You know, I think I'm a better novelist probably than a TV writer, just because I'm more passionate about it. I just care so deeply about it. And like, you know, writing for TV, you try to care deeply. You try to think every single thing possible about House or whoever the character might be, and think about that character as deeply as you can. You do. That's your aspiration as a writer, and that's what I do. But it's just, it comes more naturally. And maybe it would come naturally if I created a TV show. That would be a different thing. But it just comes more naturally when I'm writing a novel. I don't have to try to make myself care. It's just like there deeply, because the reason I wrote that thing in the first place was because this character, you know, appeared to me or whatever. This character was just so crucial to me.
Here's the difference. When either way, when you've created the character or the story, you have a much greater investment in that story, I think. And which is why I didn't want to go onto somebody else's show when I started. But when you've created the character and the world, you wake up thinking about it. At 3 o'clock in the morning, when you wake up, that's what you dream about. So I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
I just want to say, oh, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, I think it's absolutely true. And I would just add there are ways to, you know, I did become incredibly passionate about writing for Madam Secretary. And it really took off after Trump was elected, because it was this platform to reach millions of people. And, you know, every episode I did a two-part episode about separating children from their parents at the border. I did a lesson in the 25th Amendment, for the Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, how to remove a president if he's acting crazy. And then we did a whole white nationalism arc, an international white nationalism, and militias becoming domestic terrorists. I mean, we basically almost did like a January 6th, even though the show ended a year ago. So, that's how I found my incredible passion for it. I did an anti-vaxxer episode because I'm passionate about being anti-vaxxer. And so there are, I totally agree. I mean, I think that it's important, especially for people breaking in, do what you're passionate about. I mean, I had a totally unsuccessful, I don't know what to call it, career or non-career as a screenwriter. I wrote with a partner 11 screenplays, feature-length screenplays. We had more than 100 meetings all over town, every studio, and we came close a few times, never sold anything. And I only broke into the business when I did the cure for that, which was I just wrote a play. I didn't try to hit any mark. I didn't try to, write the thing that was in the zeitgeist. I just wrote a play only for me, totally theatrical. That was the play that got me my first TV writing job because I was passionate about it. So whatever you're doing, write haiku as long as you're passionate about it, and it'll lead somewhere, I think. Yeah.
I have to say, it's so funny. Even though I'm doing a dopey sci-fi thing, we like to do things through allegory and metaphor. And, also had a great experience attacking Trump and Trumpism in the 22nd century as well. And nothing was better than on the next day on Twitter reading these outraged conservatives who were so upset that we were attacking their boy. So that was fun. But I have to say, for those who are at Brandeis, you are so lucky to be going to a liberal arts school, because so much of writing, it's like people always ask on these panels, should I take a producing class? Should I take a television class? It's like, no, you should take a life class. You should learn. I was a political science major. Learn as much of it and have as many experiences when this pandemic is over. Travel, study abroad, just soak everything up. That's what will make your writing interesting, rather than, it's like in the golden age of TV, you look at these, these people are so fascinating, and people now are too. And it's like, don't just understand TV, but conversely, and I think this is a big thing for me, it is very important to understand the history of television and the history of film. Nothing makes me crazier than when I go into a pitch and it's like, it's Jules and Jim meets Tequila Sunrise. And they look at you, it's like, what's Jules and Jim? And it's like, oh, this is painful. And, but you know what Tequila Sunrise is? No. So it's like, but Robert Town is? No. And it's like, it makes me insane. So it's so important to understand, the history, where you come from. Just like in Judaism, we teach about how important it is to understand your roots and where you come from. In television and features, it's so important to understand the history. And, especially now I read a lot of people who say, we have nothing to learn from movies before 1978, or it's like, no, you have so much, if you want to write comedy, look at Ernie Lehman, look at Billy Wilder. I mean, it's so instructive, and it's all there for the taking. It's not as hard as when we were young, where we really had to struggle. We had to go to the Brattle. You can go, walk across the room and hit your button on 900 streaming channels and watch this stuff.
But let me say, back to Jim Clay. I think the study of theater and playwriting also leads you to this. And that's what he taught me, that you can look at the structure of a play and understand what the structure of a TV show or a movie should be. And I believe that the study of theater will really inform the writing of television.
Absolutely. Yep.
So it is 4:58 on the West Coast. I think it is time to kick things back over to Michelle, because I know that as we've been talking, the chat has been exploding with all sorts of questions. And I want to make sure we give some time for some of those questions to come up. So Michelle, if you would, take it away.
Guys, I will say we've had some amazing questions. It's going to be a little difficult for me to choose. I'll also say that I just got a call from Brandeis. So I feel like they want my money right now. So I'm just going to tell them after that I'm doing this. Hopefully that's sufficient for now. Okay, so so many questions, guys. This was very difficult. The first one I want to ask is, what do you do when you struggle with writer's block or creative's block? Like, talk about this specifically. I remember David Grae had a great answer to this on the podcast.
I got to jump in. If you're a professional writer, it doesn't exist. It's an excuse. It's like saying, if you're a pipe fitter and you have pipe fitter's block, or you're a janitor and you have mopping block. I mean, you have to lower your standards. You know, not everything's the great American novel. I mean, I do think, here's my 2 cents. If I ever become a guru and a self-help expert, I think lowering your standards is the key to happiness in life. I'm just saying, but yeah, the writer's block I just think is bullshit. And you certainly, if you have writer's block, don't be a TV writer, be a novelist. I mean,
That's right. I agree with you. You can't have writer's block and be a TV writer. I have to say that every blank page scares the fuck out of me. It's awful. But in terms of what David is saying, I always do what I call a vomit draft. Just get words on paper, just get it down, and then do the rewrite, which is much more fun.
Totally agree. Yeah.
And David, I also remember you once said, which really stuck with me, is give yourself a deadline, right? Just give yourself a deadline, just do it. And that really helps.
You have to, if you don't have a deadline, it's, when I taught creative writing 27 years ago in New York, I had a very successful journalist come in who was he was like in his mid 60s. He said he never missed a deadline in a 40-year career in journalism, but he could never finish a short story that he was just writing for himself. So
yeah, that really stuck out for me. I brought that up quite a few times actually, and everyone goes, "That's brilliant." So yeah. This is from Deborah Curtis.
By the way, my suggestion, by the way, would be to exercise. That'd be my suggestion.
Well, and also learn your rhythms. Everyone has different rhythms to write and they have to figure them out. I know that in my case, I have to ride waves. Other people can say, I'm going to work between 9 and 2 nonstop. Other people say, I'm going to get this many words down on paper. You have to learn your own process.
I love that. Yeah, I read Shonda Rhimes once said that for her, writing was like a marathon. The first few miles are really hard, but then once you kind of get to a certain place, she's like, it's smooth sailing. So she's like, don't interrupt me when I'm in that place or else I won't get there. So this question is from Deborah Curtis, who was part of our film and TV executives panel last week. What's one big lesson learned along the way that you wish you knew before you stepped into this situation, be it either starting out as a staff writer or as a new showrunner?
All right, I'll jump in. I think I wish I had lifted up more voices of color. I wish I had been more conscious of hiring in an equitable way. At the time I called myself colorblind, and now I kind of say I was just blind. And that's my greatest wish, that I had known then what I know now.
I'll say, and Marta, I've read some of your, what you've said on this recently, which I appreciate. There was a crazy thing, and you'll remember better than me, but like in the business, and maybe this was, I don't mean to kick it back to Deborah, but and again, everyone is to blame. There's no question, but the view was there are Black shows and there are white shows, or there are, you know, urban shows and I remember when I worked on Gilmore Girls, it was an all white writing staff, and we were on the Warner Brothers lot, and we were next door to the show Girlfriends, which I think was on UPN, and it was pretty much an all black staff. And we'd see each other out, you know, we had a basketball hoop, and we'd like just see each other out on the street or see each other going into each other's, and that was the black show, and I guess we were the white show. And that was it was just so ingrained in it's crazy that it was like that, but it's just right, Marta? I mean, again, I'm not excusing it at all. It's crazy. It's a weird, I think it had to do with how they sold, I don't know, how they did the math on advertising. I don't know. It's not an excuse. It's just the way it seemed to be back then. I'll answer the question. Yeah. I'll do my quick answer though to the question is the reverse. I'm glad I didn't know about the psychopaths on either side of the camera, because I might not have gotten into the business. I have had, you know, it's like I used to feel like when I lived in London for the year, I always attracted, you know, I'd be at the tube stop minding my own business late at night, and the wackos would always be, I was like, you know, the honey the flies would come to. You know, there's, you know, there are a lot of spoiled, insane psychopaths, whether it's certain showrunners or actors or directors. And I didn't realize that. And I literally read a couple books on psychopaths like 12 or 13 years ago, because I wanted to get to know my showrunner a little better. The show I was working on. But that's, you know.
Frantically researches all the showrunners you've worked for. Not Barbara Hill. Definitely, let's say right there, not Barbara Hill.
I guess one thing I've learned over the years, I kind of thought that when I got older, I would get wiser. And I'm not exactly sure that that's happened. But what I have realized is that nobody else actually knows anything either. And I wish that I had realized when I was younger that everybody else was just as confused as I am.
Yeah, I mean, I think you go with that, the Bill Goldman adage. That's a good one, you know, which is nobody knows anything. And that would be my regret. You know, sometimes you're chasing what's a trend. Just write what you're passionate about. You know, don't try and chase what's popular. By the time you do it, you know, people can tell, you know, you're just trying to do, you know, what's trendy right then. And you know, I think, you know, write stories that you just want to tell. That's hopefully that'll go, other people want to hear it.
Love it. So I want to ask a question about writing. Who reads your work? Like, obviously, I mean, all of you guys have your own process, but who do you give your writing to? Like, I know, David, you know, you said you're now essentially developing a whole series. You're used to having a writer's room under you. Like, how do you guys, who do you send your writing to now?
Definitely, I always do to make sure I'm not fucking crazy, to show it to my wife. That's basically that's the only buffer. And it's funny because, you know, I do it less. The longer I've been working, like, I stopped showing her just like, you know, drafts of episodes I've written on a show, you know, long ago, but she still gets all the pilots, you know, and every step of the way on the pilot, she gets the outline, and I get her notes. But other than that, I mean, that's just a weird thing about development. But I think a lot of people do have a network of friends that they use, and I do that sometimes, I guess, in pilot development. This pilot I'm working on now happens to be, it's a sci-fi concept actually that made my head spin, and it's a ton of research and all sorts of experts in oceanography and astrobiology and all sorts of stuff. And so I brought in a really smart, like, mid-level writer to co-create it with me. And that's like 2 people is a writer's room, you know, that's a writer's room, you know, so it does make it a lot more efficient than.
I want to answer the question I wish you asked rather than the question you did ask, which is for young people, you know, young aspiring people who are breaking in. Like, don't expect your friends to read all 6 drafts. Wait until it's like as good as it possibly is, and then ask the favor. Because, you know, it's always okay to ask the favor once, but like, you know, and then people are really happy to help you. But when you start to become, even if it's your best friend, draft 6, draft 7, stop. And particularly if you're going to take it, you know, you know somebody in the industry who's going to do you a favor, make sure you put your absolute best foot forward. You think it's good enough? Wait a week, read it again. You know, it's like, don't take advantage of those favors and expect that door will always be open to you. Not because people are jerks. It's just people are really busy. And it can, you know, and if you are reading scripts for a living, reading scripts as a favor isn't as much fun, or you just don't have the time for it.
And
I
also,
try to offer. Sorry, go ahead.
People aren't as effective too when they read it for the 3rd or the 4th or the 5th time. They're just not as good at it. They're going to miss things. But yeah, I use the give it to the wife strategy. That's certainly my go-to. I'm also in a writers group that meets every Friday. So we read 20 pages at a time. And then, you know, when I finish a draft, I'll give it to the 2 or 3 people over the years that I've learned that I can really trust to give me smart notes. I don't give it to 5 or 6 or 7 because it makes my head explode, but I don't give it to just one. I give it to 2 or 3 people each draft. And if I do more than one draft, I have to give it to 2 or 3 other people. And also I think it's really helpful to have people read it out loud. So if it's a script, you know, have them do a Zoom reading. God willing, when we get around to not needing Zoom, invite them over your house, give them pizza, and have them read it out loud. So that's another strategy.
I often try to trade reads with screenwriting friends if I have a new draft. So I'll find out who's got something new that they need notes on, and we just swap. And that way there's a bit of a quid pro quo, and it sort of balances out a little bit. But I'm not a panelist. I'll leave.
Oh, no, it's great advice. No. I appreciate that. Okay. Someone asked this. This is a newer question. Once you have a completed script, do you have recommendations for next steps? So let's say you had it workshopped, you had it read aloud. Do you recommend selling it somewhere? Do you recommend writing contests? You know, what would be the next step you do with your script?
You know,
I know there's a lot.
It's a tough question. One of the options is that you find someone who will champion your script. An agent, a manager, a showrunner, a production company. If you can, you know, find a way to get your script to some of those people, that would be extremely useful. And then there are all the contests, but I have to be honest, I've never hired anyone based on a contest.
No. Good to know.
I mean, the programs are great, but they're very competitive. You know, like Warner Brothers has an hour drama program and a whatchamacallit, a comedy program, and they tend to place their writers. You know, they'll give a writer to Marta and say, here's someone, you don't have to pay this person, you know, on a network show or a Warner Brothers show or something. And I've seen people really succeed from that. I've worked with writers who've really been lifted up by that. But you know, when I applied to the Warner Brothers program, and they had no interest in me off of my spec. And I found out I got my first job around the same time I found out they rejected me. So, you know, it's like you have to try every way, I think, is the answer. It's whatever works for you.
So good. Great advice.
I agree in the champion, but Marta, if there's a young person who will just bust it and do everything they can because they're trying to make their own career on your script, that kind of passion and energy that's how you get stuff made. So whether it's a young producer or a young agent or a young manager, someone who wants to get off a desk as an assistant, you know, and this is your writing could be their ticket to what they want to do.
Excellent. Just a couple more questions. They're getting so many good ones. Someone asked Gabriel Shorr, I've been told TV is a writer's medium, but film is a director's medium. Do you think that still holds true to some extent?
Why do you think we keep doing TV? It is the writer's medium. The showrunner is holds the vision, not the director. So all the writers are part of that vision, and their scripts are in that vision, and the director then has to respond to that, because they're, they know the one episode they're doing, not the whole course of the series. And then in a film, it is a writer may write something, but it then becomes the director's vision. So yeah, that's why I stay in TV.
And I think a lot of directors fuck up perfectly good scripts because they have some vision. There are a lot of great directors, but I think in film, they're given too much. They're given too much authority to just screw up a perfectly good script because of their vision of how they think it needs to be, when really it's all there on the page, if it's a good script. And in television, the writer has to be the showrunner, because like Marta said, the writer's the only one who can answer every question. It's by necessity. I'm sure if executives could figure out a way to make writers not the showrunners, they would. Some
but
executives.
That's happening
would.
now, unfortunately. You
What's
see
that?
some of these streamers, they're basically having the writers write, a full season and then sending it off with the director and trying to, keep and this is something that WGA is going to have to get involved with, because
Right.
it's obviously some of these people, they would be more than happy to have showrunners out of the equation, because, standing up for what, we believe in. And, the thing that's really important to understand about show running is it's not just writing. The first thing you learn in the showrunner's training program, anytime you read about show running, it's hiring people. It's building a small company. It's hiring your production designer and your costume designer and your cast and your casting director. And there's so many decisions you're making every day, about the cut, about the editing, about the music, the composer. So, writing is only a part of it. So if you're lucky enough to have your own, series get picked up, a fraction of your day is devoted to writing. There's so many other decisions that you're making, and that's not a 9 to 5 thing. That's a 24, because you can't stop thinking about it. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you're watching cuts and you're giving notes, and it doesn't stop, and you got to love it.
But it all comes from the creative vision, which could only come from one person or two people, or whoever the creator or the showrunner who makes it their baby, but it's got to be the writer who has the whole thing in their head.
And another issue is so many people are trying to get the executive producer credit. And you can start me on this one and my head will explode. But, the showrunner, that's the credit, the executive producer credit. And the people in the studio and on the network are getting that credit for giving you notes makes me insane.
Yeah.
It makes me insane. And I think the Writers Guild needs to get involved in this and start to find a credit that differentiates the executive.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. I've worked
like
on
they used
two
to have
shows.
executive in charge of production,
Yeah. I've worked on 2 shows. I've worked on 2 shows with executive producers who I never met. Like, they had a giant office. I never met them. I was there for a year.
Wow. Yeah. I don't think also people know, I'm just going to go off of Mark's thought for a second. As an actor, the actors are decided by the showrunners. So I don't know if everyone knows that, but when the actor puts their tape or goes to a casting director's office, the person making the decision on that actor is the showrunner. So the showrunner does everything. It's a very all-inclusive job. You guys do so much. It's crazy.
It's an awesome job.
Yeah.
Yes, awesome job. It's just so insane to me to think about how much you guys have to be responsible for and constantly. It sounds like a everyday 7 days a week type of job. What's a good ask that people who do get to meet you that you want them to ask you? And the reason why I'm asking this is I once talked to Stan Brooks, or he actually mentioned it in a if you guys know him, he's a film producer, but he was on one of our original panels, and he said he really hates it when people ask him something and he's like, I'm not able to do this, what's a good ask? If someone comes into the room or someone's able to talk with you, what do you want them to ask you? What's a good ask? This
Wow.
could be different for different people, obviously. It's subjective.
I think for me, it depends.
Yeah.
If we're talking about someone who's breaking in, a good ask is, how do I learn more? That to me is the best ask, as opposed to, merely how do I get an agent or how do I get a manager? I think, how do I learn more? And how do I participate in the process in order to learn more?
Well said. So good. Yeah, I want people, especially, any of you guys are listening. I also learn from everyone here, obviously, but I think that's so important to know if you're in school, if you're in Brandeis still, if you just graduated, if you've been doing this for years, that's so key, because you don't want to ask sort of the same old question I think everyone gets, which is, can you introduce me to someone? Can you read all this that I have? Can you be my champion right off the bat without knowing me? So I appreciate
I'll
that.
tell you what not to ask.
Yeah.
Don't ask, how can I avoid anybody stealing my ideas?
Yes.
I always have the same answer. I say it very rarely happens, and if you have one good idea, you're in the wrong business. So lucky. Somebody, it's like people are so worried about people stealing their script ideas.
Yeah.
I'm happy if writers move out to LA and, they want to have coffee with me or whatever, I'm happy to give them, the rap about how to make it as a TV writer for, 45 minutes, an hour, answer whatever questions they have. Basically, I say what we've been saying in this Zoom, but, I'm happy to give somebody a general, kind of concept. I don't know, just, general starting out.
I agree. That's the best ask. Can I pick your brain for 45 minutes or an hour? I never ever say no when someone asks that, because there, but for the grace of God, everyone who's successful in this business got lucky at some point. Everyone, and I I'd include Steven Spielberg in that, and some of the most successful people. It's just, and so they had someone who listened to them, and yeah, just to point you in the right direction. I've never ever said no to anyone. But yeah, don't ask me to read your script if I don't know you. I'll read.
Don't ask for money.
Great rule of thumb.
I had somebody that contacted me. It happens, and I said, look, I would love to meet you. I said, I'm particularly busy right now, but reach out to me in a month or two, and hopefully I'll have more time. And they were good enough not to be too persistent, because they reached out and they said, is now a good time? And I'm like, it's not, but don't take this as a blow off. Give me another, couple of weeks. And meanwhile, in the process, I'd hired a writer's assistant on my show the first season, who I'd worked with and used on another show, who I really liked. We were starting up the writer's room before all the money had come in. So literally, I said to the writer's assistant, I said, okay, me and the other executive producer are going to go to Trader Joe's and pick up all the stuff for the writer's room. I need you to go to Office Max to pick up yellow stickies and pens and to do all this. And he goes, I'm not a PA. I'm not a PA. Meanwhile, I just told him how me and the other executive producer are actually picking up all this stuff ourselves. And then he has this incredible opportunity. And we were giving him a script too. And I said, and now you're not a writer's assistant. So that day I fired him because it was unconscionable that he didn't want to be a team player. And at the same day, this other guy who had been calling me every month or two, said, hey, I just want to find out if you had time for coffee. I just finished on American Gods. I was the writer's assistant. I said, really? I said, would you like to come into the room for a week and be a writer's assistant? And if it's a good fit for you and it's a good fit for us, I'd love to hire you. And he's like, oh my God. So I said, this beats coffee, right? I'm like, yeah. He's like, yes. And so he came in, he was great. He was my writer's assistant the first season.
Michelle, there was a question here I just wanted to quickly address. about, is it common for you to be asked to rewrite? It is not only common, it is welcomed. I call myself a notes whore. I will take ideas from anyone if it makes it better. And there's no reason not to rewrite, because nothing that you write is perfect. And it can only get better as long as your vision remains. You can't change the vision in the middle. But if you know what you feel passionate about and you address the heart of the note that someone is giving you, it can only make it better.
Love it. I'm finding it very hard, guys, to end it. I feel like maybe we have time for just one more question. It's very difficult. So I'll just end it on a somewhat positive note. Is there a show on the air right now, other than the one you might be working on, that you wish you could write for, or that you love and just respect and admire?
I'll jump right in on that. I mean, I would be a staff writer on Succession. I just think that is I'll do a freelance. I'll be a PA on Succession. I think that's the best written show since The Sopranos. It's just my kind of thing. You know, I'm bummed I didn't create it, you know. I just think it's a great show.
You know, I always come back to, it's not a show that's on the air now, but the movie I wish I'd written was Terms of Endearment. I wish I'd written that movie. I think it is so many things: beautiful character studies, funny, emotional, painful. It's everything. And it reminds me of what I'd like to do with my work.
Yeah, I think, you know, I would say there's shows that I love. I don't know if I'd want to go and work on, you know, on these shows, because again, I think once you have the opportunity to create your own shows, that's what you want to do. You know, plus I can't write in French, so I can't be on Call My Agent. You know, but there's stuff that I'm watching, like What We Do in the Shadows and Lupin and a couple other shows I've really been enjoying. You know, and we are in a really golden age, platinum age of television. You know, I think for me, it's sort of like, hey, what show would you remake if you had the opportunity? And you know, that to me, it's like I always have my sort of stock answer. There was a show that was sort of the beginning of serialized TV in the late 80s, which was a Stephen Cannell show called Wise Guy, which I think is ripe for reinvention, as they say. But you know, so much great television. We're so lucky to live in a world where there is this abundance of riches everywhere you look, and it's all instructional. You know, you should read other scripts. You should read scripts from the shows you love, from the great TV shows. Read Vince Gilligan, read these people. You will learn so much.
Yeah, I also love Call My Agent. The one show that I watch that just blows my mind is The Affair. And I watch it, you know, my jaw's dropping because it's just so amazing. You know, it's got everything that I love. It's a great crime show, which I love crime shows. You know, the writing of the characters, each individual scene is just so beautiful. The dialogue is great. The characters are great. The moral complexity is fabulous. And it's also, you know, it's structurally interesting. It has these different perspectives in each episode. So I would say that's the one show that I just watched and I go, oh my God, this is just incredible.
I want to watch David Grae's episode of Succession. I'll watch anything with Succession on, but particularly David Grae's episode of Succession.
And I want to just when maybe like after we're done with this, Marta, I just wanted to talk to you about borrowing some money. So if we could, you know.
Yeah, I have 3 scripts I want each of you to read.
Get in line.
And I need a champion, guys. I need a champion behind them. Guys, thank you so much. This has been so valuable, so appreciated. We really thank you on behalf of the entire Brandeis community. Thank you guys all for just all your wisdom and guidance. We want to make sure that, you know, there's a thriving community for Brandeis Alumni Entertainment. So we appreciate you. Guys, I put down an email if any of you have any, suggestions for future guests, future panels, email us there.
Michelle, can I
recording will
interrupt
be
for one
available.
second?
Please.
I just want to plug a panel this weekend. I recorded, which is relevant to this, which is the only reason I'm mentioning it. It is WonderCon is a live event that was done virtually because of the pandemic. And I moderated a panel with about 10 showrunners, wonderful talent, people from The Flight Attendant, from The Boys, from The Summer I Turned Pretty, from a wonderful group of showrunners and writers, and it'll be on YouTube through the Comic-Con WonderCon portal starting on Saturday. And I think we're doing a clubhouse on Sunday with a bunch of the writers, and all wonderfully talented showrunners. Since we recorded already, I know how articulate they were in talking about what they do, and so I just want to plug that in case any of you are interested in hearing more about writing for TV. And
I wanted to add just two quick things.
Please.
One is, and I think other people have mentioned, and I wanted to say that Brandeis was ended up being the perfect school for me, and the English department and theater department, made me, into whatever success I have. I really owe to everything I learned back then, and it was incredible. And I want to thank Michelle. Thank you, Michelle and Arnon. You do an absolute great job putting this together. It's an honor to be a part of it for me, and I know for everyone else. And really, you guys, wonderful, great job. Thank you.
And Michelle, if you ever do write something, any of us would be happy to read it for you.
Yeah, I want to echo how great Brandeis is. I think it's so important. It was incredible 4 years. I still so many friends and so much that I take away from Brandeis. And remember the guy on Castle that first year, David, was also a Brandeis alum. We had 3 Brandeis alums in the writer's room. Remember Leslie Valdez?
Yes.
And we couldn't believe it. We're like, how could there be 3 of us on one show? But it was Brandeis is really a remarkable. I mean, what college has a castle? Come on. I mean, it's great.
The Brandeis Mafia.
I have to ask one more thing, because I saw it in the chat, and I know people want to know. I think I already know the answer to this because I heard Marta Kauffman's on Hollywood Reporter Awards Chatter podcast talk about this. But Marta, can you let us know how much of Friends and specifically Chums was inspired by Brandeis? I got the question. It wasn't
Central Perk. Central Perk.
To do this.
Central Perk. I meant that.
I hate to do this to you, but it was not connected at all.
Yeah.
It was about a coffee house that I saw when I moved to LA called Insomnia Cafe. And it just struck me what an interesting notion. And it wasn't about Chumleys at all.
That'll be in the next show.
As a former tour guide for Brandeis, they tell us to tell that story. And so someone needs to talk to them. But thank you for clearing that up for all of us.
I took my daughter on a tour of Brandeis, and they said that. And she looked at me like, don't you say a word.
It's so good.
Well, I want to just jump in and say, first of all, it's really been an honor and a pleasure for us. Michelle and I have been really excited about this panel for a really long time. And we're doing this because we want to help build the Brandeis network in the entertainment industry. We've got a lot of people here in this chat, in this Zoom, who are Brandeisians, who are connected to the industry. There is a Facebook group, Brandeis Alumni in Film and Television. I started a bunch of years ago when I came out here to California, and there wasn't a network, but now there is. And we're alumni, and we're hiring each other and helping each other and supporting each other and cheering each other on. So join the Facebook group and be part of it. That's what we're building.
I want to say really quickly, just very quickly, I want to thank Courtney at Brandeis. I want to thank obviously our alumni group. Malik and Matt Krinsky are currently in the room right now. So thank you guys for all you do. Thank you, Arnon, obviously, for being the best moderator. And we appreciate everyone for attending, and for all our panelists. Thank you guys. This recording will be available. So at some point, if you want to send it to someone, please do. And we appreciate you. Have a wonderful evening.